Overwatch 2 is a team-based hero shooter with multiple core modes that you can play with a huge roster of characters. If you're new to Overwatch 2, haven't played the original game in a long time, or just want to brush up your knowledge on the tank roster, this video should give you an idea of which tank heroes you may want to play based off of your playstyle. Before we get into talking about specific types of heroes, it will be important to understand the different roles tanks have in Overwatch 2. Tank heroes are primarily here to mitigate damage, focus the enemy team's fire away from the team, and guide the team where they need to go. Tank is a very important role because they are the centerpiece of every team that will determine the team composition your team should follow to be more successful in each match. It is very important you understand that all tanks guide the team, but not all tanks are played the same way. For example, a standard team composition usually utilizes a ground tank such as Reinhardt, Junker Queen, Orisa, Roadhog, Zarya, or Sigma. These ground tanks are pretty good at mitigating damage on their own, and when played correctly, will guide their team with or toward the objective. However, a dive team composition will be more successful diving down specific targets or controlling the high ground to take the objective. No matter which tank you're playing, working together and synergizing with your team is essential in playing tank for your team. Now that you understand that not all tanks are the same, let's talk about what makes them different. First, we have shield tanks. The main value behind these tanks is that they excel at reducing damage with their shields. At this time, there are two core shield tanks, Reinhardt and Sigma. Reinhardt possesses a large shield that can mitigate up to 1,000 damage at a time for his entire team, and it can be recharged on its own when it doesn't take any damage. He can save his team from certain abilities such as Diva's Bomb with this shield as well. He also possesses a hammer that can be used to swing at anyone directly in front of him for a decent amount of damage. He possesses a charge movement ability that can insta-kill most heroes caught in his charge and can throw out fire strikes to damage heroes ahead of him to charge his ultimate ability. His ultimate ability, when landed successfully, stuns anyone caught in front of him, striking the ground and stunning everyone temporarily. His large build also makes it easier for support heroes to keep him healed up and a good reference point to keep everyone on the team together. He's fairly easy to play and straightforward, perfect for beginners and viable even at the highest ranks. Sigma can send out a large shield that can take up to 700 damage. You can determine the distance it's intended to travel and you could recall it. His other ability will absorb all incoming projectile and hit scan damage into a black hole and will convert the absorbed damage into shields for himself. He can also launch a boulder at an enemy to knock them back and stun them. His ultimate ability lifts everyone caught within it vertically in the air, then pulls them all downward abruptly for a considerable amount of damage. His primary attack sends out two projectile balls that explode when hitting an enemy directly or at a set distance. Like Reinhardt, he also possesses a large build that will make it easy for his team to follow and heal him. While having a flexible set of abilities, his skill level is more so at an intermediate level in my opinion. Knowing when to use his shield or damage mitigation abilities will be essential for his success. Both of these shield tanks are perfect for primarily protecting your team with shields and moving forward. However, these tanks mainly work when your team is close by and around you. They will struggle to assist mobile teammates most of the time when they're out of range, but otherwise work well with heroes that stick close to their tank. Then we have damage tanks. These are tank heroes that can output a ton of damage while also having abilities to help keep them alive longer. These heroes generally take more damage than other tanks due to how exposed they are, but make up for that in damage, helping DPS take out who they need to. I consider Zarya, Junker Queen, Roadhog, and Orisa all damage tanks. Zarya utilizes two different shield bubbles to cover specific teammates or herself, protecting them from damage and abilities. Any damage dealt to her bubbles makes her primary laser beam attack and secondary grenade launcher more powerful. Her ultimate ability, Graviton Surge, is used to shoot out essentially a mini black hole that will absorb all nearby enemies into a single position for a short period. This is a great way for your team to wombo combo their ultimates together and get team kills. She is a great tank for players more comfortable in the damage role because of her damage potential, active engagement with both her team and enemy players, and wombo combo ultimate utility. Junker Queen spreads out damage based around her entire kit. With a passive lifesteal ability, her survivability is directly connected toward how many enemies she's wounding with her abilities. Aside from a primary shotgun as her weapon, she can wound enemies with the melee attack and damage abilities. Applying a wound damages an enemy over time and heals Junker Queen. Her commanding shot ability adds a temporary 200 health to herself, 50 health to her allies, and applies a 30% speed buff to anyone nearby. For enemies that get too close, she can use Carnage to swing her axe, wounding all enemies in front of her and dealing decent damage from the attack. She can also throw her knife out at an enemy and recall it like a boomerang to apply wound. Her ultimate ability thrusts herself forward past enemies, applying wound to anyone caught in her path. She's great for players that want to go all out damage and fight the bulk of the enemy team. She's also fairly easy to heal, so as long as you don't overextend from your support heroes. She's also a fairly easy tank to play, viable at all ranks and beginner friendly. Roadhog is a tank that punishes 200 HP heroes for being out of position by hooking them in and one-shotting them with his shotgun or letting his team finish them off. He can output a crazy amount of damage if played correctly. He can also heal himself and reduce a lot of incoming damage while doing so. His scrap gun's primary shotgun based attack has a big spread, but up close it does a lot of burst damage. He also has a secondary attack that shoots out a projectile that bursts into a shotgun spread at short distance. He can survive for long periods of time, but is heavily reliant on his one-shot hook combo. Rather, he's reliant on both of his abilities entirely, as his weapon alone is not enough to create enough value from. His ultimate ability enables him to unleash a barrage of scrap from his weapon, launching anyone caught in its fire away from him while dealing out a heavy amount of damage. The closer enemies are to his ultimate while firing, the more damage they'll receive. Orisa, who plays much differently in Overwatch 2 than previously, now deals a ton of damage and with a good team, feels unkillable. Her kit revolves around pushing the enemy back and keeping them away from her team. Her primary weapon works like a minigun that shoots out projectiles that deal more damage the closer they are to you, but has damage fall off the further away they are from Orisa. Her Fortify ability reduces all damage taken to herself and prevents her from getting affected by crowd control such as stuns or knockback effects. Using Fortify in a key moment can save you and keep you in the fight longer. Her Javelin Spin ability destroys all projectiles in front of her, increases her forward movement speed, and allows her to physically push enemies back. It's a great ability to use when trying to push people off an objective or away from her team. Her Energy Javelin is a throwable spear that stuns and knocks back enemies. It does more damage if they hit a wall as well. This is also useful for keeping enemies away from her team. Her ultimate ability, Terra Surge, allows her to pull enemies toward her while she fortifies and charges up a powerful attack that can do a large amount of damage. She's an intermediate level tank in my opinion, but in the right hands can be extremely difficult to play against. Damage tanks are a great way to jump in a tank if you're more familiar with the damage role. Each of these characters' survivability is heavily dependent on whether or not you're outputting enough damage to assist your DPS. Typically these characters require a lot of healing as there is no persistent shield out to reduce damage. Then finally, we have dive tanks. That would be Winston, D.Va, Doomfist, and Wrecking Ball. These tanks are heroes that are extremely mobile and excel on maps that offer high ground advantages. They work well with flankers or mobile legends. Instead of primarily mitigating the bulk of incoming damage, they instead target specific individuals such as enemy supports or enemy damage heroes by utilizing their mobility to focus them down for DPS to clean up. Dive tanks are generally more challenging to play because they require situational awareness and an understanding of the game to play effectively. They will not be successful if played like a ground tank. Their mobility must be utilized and they must work with their team to dive on specific targets at a time. First, let's talk about Winston. Winston has an electrical based weapon that will zap anyone in front of him within a short distance and will damage through shields. This weapon is incredibly effective for people that may not have the best aim but can keep their target within their camera view. He also has a secondary attack that can be charged up, which sends out an electrical bolt over a distance, allowing him to finish off low HP enemies away from him. Using his core ability that enables him to jump considerable distances in any direction, he deals damage when landing on his target and can use his secondary ability to drop a shield on his position. He is terrific for taking out Lucios, Genjis, Widowmakers, and Mercy players because of this. Typically a good Winston will focus down enemy supports or keep any threats off the high ground. His ultimate ability, Primal Rage, reduces his jump cooldown, enabling him to jump all around the map while also giving him 1000 HP to knock enemies around or take out low HP enemies. He works great for teams constantly fighting. Then there's D.Va. She's an aggro-aggressive mecha pilot that plays as two characters in one. First there's her tank that makes up the bulk of her kit, then there's the pilot herself that is ejected from a mecha when using her ultimate or when it's destroyed. Only in her pilot form can she be eliminated. To start off with her core kit, her mech suit is equipped with miniguns that have a large fire radius, so they only do strong damage up close. For damage mitigation, she has Defense Matrix. It's a powerful field that destroys all projectiles it comes into contact with, which can eat up a lot of damage against the right team. However, she's still vulnerable to laser type weapons with beams or other forms of damage when using this. She has rocket thrusters that allow her to fly forward in any direction she's facing for 2 seconds, and you can still shoot or use her other abilities whilst doing so. It has a slight knockback effect that can push enemies back as well with light damage too. She's also got micro missiles that travel over a distance and are primarily there for extra damage. Her ultimate ability is a great crowd control ability that can force enemies away from a specific space, making them vulnerable in specific places or forcing them off an objective. She essentially self-destructs her mech, and anyone caught within the blast radius will take a large amount of damage, potentially being one-shot by it. And combined with her thrusters, she can launch the self-destructing bomb to make it travel over a distance for a little more unpredictability. D.Va can seem like a squishy tank if played incorrectly, but when using her properly and removing enemies off high ground, can her value be seen. Doomfist is a strong dive tank who has a ridiculous amount of horizontal mobility. His core attack is 4 shotgun-like shots on a small reload timer that are helpful in finishing off enemies or extra damage. His seismic slam ability allows him to leap vertically or horizontally to slam a large cone in front of him on the ground. This ability is great for crowd control and setting Doomfist's team up for success by starting the engagement with burst damage spread out toward the core enemy team. His power block is a defensive ability to reduce frontal damage against yourself. If you take enough damage while using this ability, it will make your next rocket punch stronger. Rocket punch is a powerful movement ability that launches Doomfist forward to knock an enemy back. If they hit a wall, they take more damage. Any damage done with his abilities grants him temporary health. He's a bruiser kind of hero, and his toolkit allows him to dive on his enemies, deal a lot of damage, then take cover. Finally, we have Wrecking Ball. Champion of Junkertown and lethal arena fighter. Wrecking Ball has a ton of movement potential and relies on his entire ability kit for value. With miniguns as his primary attack, he's capable of dealing decent damage at a medium range. As Hammond, you can avoid critical damage and reload your miniguns in ball mode. This allows you to roll around and use your grappling hook. Your grappling hook is capable of slinging you across great distances, which can grant you max speed. At max speed, you can knock back enemies and deal damage toward them. Using the grappling hook to gain max speed and knock back the enemy team will be essential in your playstyle as him. His pile drive ability will be a powerful tool to dive specific targets as well. Position yourself above them and use pile drive to dive into the ground, dealing 100 damage from the center of this attack and launching enemies caught upward into the air. For defense, he has an adaptive shield ability, which grants shields on himself per every enemy nearby. He's literally a great tank to dive into the enemy, deal damage, and get out. His ultimate ability, Minefield, is a great ability for zoning out enemies and denying them space. He disperses a minefield from his position and each mine deals a ton of damage, fatal to squishies. I'd say he's an intermediate level character to learn, but he's heavily reliant on his abilities, so a Sombra can make things a bit more difficult for him. Fortunately, Overwatch has many different ways to play tank, so this video should give you an idea of the different ways to play it and which characters you should try. Let me know in the comments below which tanks you want to try. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Overwatch content. Take it easy, and peace out.